Gators Breakdown, because there's never a dull moment in Gator Nation.
The Gators Breakdown podcast is ready to go. I am your host, David Waters. You can find me on Twitter at GatorDave_SEC. I'm back. I'm refreshed. A little bit of vacation time, a little bit of family time. Try to unplug as much as I could. Watch a little bit of Gator baseball along the way as well. Congrats to those guys making it to the College World Series. But of course, right here on Gators Breakdown, all football, all the time. And we're going to talk about some recruiting. Gators finally get a commitment here off these official visits. We'll get into that, of course. Mike Williams, offensive lineman, committing to the Gators. Just all kind of recruiting storylines off of these official visits. We'll review the visits from this past weekend. A little more recruiting storylines as well with Chauncey Bowens flipping to Georgia. I got some catching up to do since I was on vacation a bit. So some of these news items will be a little dated, not so much. I mean, a lot of this stuff happened over the weekend. Update on Austin Simmons as well, the quarterback. 2025 quarterback for the Gators that visited Ole Miss last week. Maybe put a scare in Gator Nation a little bit. Was on campus late last week before a lot of these official visits started. I think everything's good to go there. We'll get into that just a bit right now. And then that's it. So a lot of recruiting to get into, of course, right now as we are here about mid-June. And after Florida's second official visit weekend. So hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. We are back right here on Gators Breakdown. Get those notifications when we go live. Subscribe on your favorite podcast platform if you haven't done so yet. But on YouTube, the likes and the subscribes go a long way. Join Gators Breakdown Plus if you haven't done so yet. Keep that conversation going, of course, with all these visits and the baseball chat room as well. Very, very busy right now on the Gators Breakdown Plus Discord. You get access to that on the link in the description. So, all right, let's get to it. Gator Nation, you know how we do it. We got to commit. Mike Williams, 3-star on the 24/7 Sports Composite, 3-star on the On3 industry rankings as well. I know the ranking's not going to blow you away here. He is the 1,326th overall player on the 24/7 Sports Composite and 107th ranked offensive tackle. And on 3 has him as the 1,346th overall player with 100th ranked offensive tackle, Mike Williams. So, after these two official visit weekends, the Gators get their first commit off of these weekends. 6'6", 325 pounds, Mike Williams. He's a recent South Carolina decommit, a Maryland native. Visited Florida this past weekend after visiting Michigan State last weekend. Had a trip to the Gamecocks scheduled for this coming up weekend. And we'll see if that happens. I know there's some talk that he was dropped by South Carolina, and we'll see. They have a really good offensive line class. That was coming after a disagreement that I was told. This was well before a Florida visit was even going to happen. It was right on the heels of this South Carolina decommitment. I was told, this dude's just talking Mike Williams in South Carolina. It had nothing to do with Florida. That it was just a disagreement. He was dropped. If that's how you want to label it, and that's how it was described to me a couple of weeks ago, right after the decommitment was made public. So not a drop in the sense they just didn't want him any longer because of the type of player he is, or his ranking, or if they got somebody better. A disagreement. It would just happen about a month after he committed in the first place. So, this isn't your. We just don't want him anymore. Drop. Disagreement. Move on. Set some new visits up. Gators are a second visit. He commits to the Gators. So yeah, rankings. Of course, I know they won't blow you away here. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. All that. Miami was thought to be an early trending team here before he committed to South Carolina. And the scouting report on Williams brings size and length that could slot him in as tackle at the next level, but his run blocking upside and physicality could also make him a well-suited player on the inside as well. So at South Carolina, they saw him as a combo player that the staff can, slot at the best position as he continues to develop. A guy with some intriguing physical traits and toughness. At one point had a top 8 with teams like Tennessee, Miami, Michigan State, Southern Cal in that top 8. So from everything I can gather here, more of a tackle prospect for Florida, South Carolina may be looking at him as inside, outside, wherever they saw it fit, and maybe down the road as he develops. But I think tackle first is what we kind of see here, at least for the Gator side of it. When you take a look at the size, 6'6", 325, more likely listed as an offensive tackle in the recruiting services as well. So maybe a combo player for some, maybe more of an offensive tackle for others. We'll see how it turns out for Florida, but more on the tackle side, I think, as we look at Mike Williams here. So, first offensive line commit for the Gators in this 24 class at a position of need, of course, in that tackle spot. So he's Florida's 8th commitment right now, with Chauncey Bowens flipping to Georgia, of course. So it stays at 8 there for the Gators with a recent decommit and now this new commitment here. Lowest commit in the class is Williams. Joins Bryce Lovett and Caden Jones from last cycle as high school players recruited to play offensive tackle. But let's also throw Keontae Goodwin in there, the transfer from Kentucky, of course. He was a true freshman last year. This to be his second overall year, so you throw him into these recent offensive tackles that Florida's bringing in. So his second year overall, but this is a young core of offensive tackle prospects that you kind of group together in the coming years here for the Gators. So Mike Williams, as I said, Bryce Lovett, Caden Jones, Keontae Goodwin. That's your future grouping of offensive tackle prospects. This commit puts Florida at 18th in the 24/7 sports composite. Of course, fell after losing Chauncey Bowens. I know, look, this is a top prospect everyone's hoping for coming off these official visits. But the staff, they have an evaluation process for each and every position that these players have to pass. And, that should hopefully make these kinds of takes and this level of rated player work out down the road. We saw it happen at Louisiana, those transfers that come to Florida and do so well. But, you start looking at this collectively, especially for this position group. There aren't high-level players to point to at this position group, offensive tackle, as far as pure high school recruiting go for the Gators. And now you're asking the staff to hit on these, at least a few of these, or at least a couple of these, when you look at it. I never get disappointed in any one recruit. We don't know how any one recruit's really going to pan out. We don't know which 2-star, 3-star is going to be the diamond in the rough. We don't know which 4-star, 5-star won't live up to the billing, but collectively, we know how this usually turns out. So right now, I think when you look at this, if you're looking for the diamond in the rough with all these kind of lower rated offensive tackle prospects, that puts the staff in a tough position. You have a group of those lower rated offensive tackle prospects, and this being a developmental position, we won't be getting our answer anytime soon for this. But now, this staff's going to have a high hit rate on some lower rated prospects. And look, I know there's the Osiris Torrances out there of the world, but he's special, and you can point him out just because of the situation, being so successful there at Louisiana, being all SEC, being an NFL draft pick. But all in all, now you're asking this staff to do that 2-3 times right here at this offensive tackle spot. Torrance a guard, of course. I know that, but now two of these guys could absolutely develop and go on to become stars. It's just the hit rate at this level of player not as high as it is for a lot of the other higher players. So this staff, this is what they put themselves in right now for this offensive tackle spot. So we'll see how it goes. As we said, they have an evaluation process. Guys have to have certain size and length and speed and power. So we'll see how that goes and how it translates for, finding these quote unquote diamonds in the rough. But, the way Florida has recruited this position, that's the way it's going to be right here. So there's your look at commit. Mike Williams, recent decommit from South Carolina, stays in the SEC East, commits to the Gators, and becomes the 8th commit of the class. So visited this past weekend, and we got a lot more to talk about, a lot more visitors to discuss here. And I went on the little tirade, I guess, last week of Florida not getting a commit after the first official visit weekend, and maybe displaying a little bit of patience or whatever. But one thing before we move forward, we're all fans here. I get it. There's a lot of frustration out there from many of you. I heard it even on vacation when I would peek in on the phone every now and then on the Gators Breakdown Plus Discord or Twitter a bit. But no, I know there's some frustration, disappointment from many of you of how these June visits have played out so far. And I told you guys last week how I felt, and I can wait it out before I make proclamations and such. And at the same time, now we can express disappointment, or you can express disappointment, frustration when things don't go the way we want or expect, but keep it respectful. Don't take it too far. While I will wait until the end for a final say, we can discuss every story along the way. If a decommit happens, look, most of the time that's not good news. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. We all want, we all follow this because we care, and not just can't just necessarily really fall back on, oh, let's wait till December or February before we even discuss it. No, these are things that are happening that we can discuss positively or negatively. So things change. There'll be good news. There'll be bad news. In recruiting, there's more bad news than good news for 95% of teams out there. So I can wait for my proclamation. That's not going to stop me from discussing all the storyline leading up to it. That's what we're here for. Engage in conversation. I'm not going to fall back on it's only June or timing phrases like that. We can discuss what's happening. We can discuss the happenings and knowings of things that will go and know things can and will change. When you follow as closely as a lot of us do, that's the nature of it. So, one day can be bad news. Next day can be good news. Let's just talk about it all. So, all right, with that said, let's get into all these other visitors from this past weekend. Let's start at wide receiver. The last episode I did before I headed out of town, of course, was where Florida could turn after TJ Moore commits to Clemson, the wide receiver. So let's start with wide receiver off of these this past weekend's official visits. Of course, these visits were happening anyway, no matter what was happening with Moore. But the Gators, truthfully, are players for Chance Robinson and Jure Hawkins here. Robinson, the Miami commit, St. Thomas Aquinas. He'd be a nice get. We're losing out on Moore, similar in size at 6 foot, 1.5, 190 pounds is Robinson. Billy Gonzalez really working this one. This looks to be a Miami-Florida battle moving forward. Hopefully returning for an unofficial visit to the Gators before the summer is over. But first, he will return to Miami for an official visit as of now for this June 23rd weekend. So still not this weekend, but next weekend. But that's where things kind of stand with Chance Robinson. Florida really opened his eyes. Florida's really a player here. Of course, Mike committed to Miami. We'll see if any decision comes before that June 23rd weekend, or if he'll take that June 23rd visit to Miami, make his final decision. But it looks to be Florida-Miami kind of leading the way right here. Now, Jure Hawkins, completely different wide receiver. We went over him a couple of times here in the last couple of weeks. 5'10", 160 pounds, that more speedy burner, smaller in stature size, make plays in space type. Florida stays in his top two after this visit this past weekend with Penn State. Had that Miami visit last weekend, but it looks like Penn State and Florida ahead of his June 26th commitment date. Can Florida make him decide before he's supposed to take that visit to Penn State the weekend before that June 26th decision date? The staff was selling him on past players produced. Billy Napier comparing him to Jalen Waddle, and Billy Gonzalez comparing him to Kadarius Toney. That's what the staff's trying to sell him on right now. So you hope maybe you go ahead and get that decision out of him before he even takes that Penn State visit, and before maybe get him to commit before that June 26th commitment date that he's got set right now. So maybe one to watch this week, next week, if that's going to happen. If it doesn't happen, I'd say within the next week and a half, he's probably going to take that Penn State visit, and then probably maybe biting your fingernails just a little bit, waiting on Jure Hawkins' decision right there on June 26th. Of course, let's keep it going. Let's go to Walter Matthews, next big name at tight end here for the Gators that was in town this past weekend. It was a Florida Southern Cal battle coming into the visit weekends. The Trojans did a really good job at closing the gap that Florida probably had going into that first official visit weekend last weekend. This past weekend was Florida's chance to build it back up, and sounds like Florida did their job here. Russ Callaway, the new tight end coach, making an impression. Location may also help the Gators here for the Georgia native. Gators need a tight end like Matthews. Really need to get this one. Staff feels like they've done about as good as they can do up to this point. hopefully that feeling pays off. Hopefully Florida was able to do everything this weekend to, USC had some momentum coming out of their visit. Hopefully Florida kind of has that same momentum coming out of their visit, but it's still Florida, still the Trojans of Southern Cal for Walter Matthews. There was a report that he might take a visit to Miami, an unofficial visit to Miami on, I think it was Tuesday of this week. Don't think that's going to happen. Florida, USC for tight end Walter Matthews out of the state of Georgia. We'll see when the decision comes from him. Another tight end in town, of course, Eric Garner from Illinois. Really impressed with Florida. Iowa's been that team that's trending, but he did tell Corey Bender now of On 3 that the Gators are probably at the top right now. Love the family atmosphere. We'll certainly have to, of course, if he's going to come from all the way from Illinois. Texas A&M and Iowa have visits the next couple of weekends. Iowa's still that school to watch for me. And, of course, hey, look, you want a tight end that Iowa wants. Iowa produces NFL tight ends. Iowa knows what the net staff that's been together for forever. Kirk Ferentz up there at Iowa knows tight ends. If Iowa wants a tight end, sign me up. I'll take a tight end just like that. Florida, of course, targeting more than one, would take at least two here. And Eric Garner, Florida made headway with him this past weekend. Walter Matthews as well. We'll see what the tight end position goes moving forward. But two to watch out for coming off of visits this past weekend. One more, but more of a wide receiver for the Gators. A tight end target, Caleb Odom. Gators recruiting him more as a big body wide receiver. He visited this past weekend, but it seems like Alabama may be too much to overcome right here. Crimson Tide's been trending as a team lately for Caleb Odom. So let's go along. Let's keep it on the offensive side of the ball. Let's go in the trenches. Florida just got a commitment, of course, from Mike Williams. But let's go along the offensive line some more. 4-star, one of the best offensive tackles in the country. Michael Uni from Texas had a good time on his Florida visit, expressed interest in returning to Florida down the road. But Clemson may be the team to beat here. Still have visits with Michigan, Bama, and Georgia. Those are to happen. Late summer commitment timeline is likely. I don't see the Gators here with Michael Uni. Good to get him on campus this past weekend. But everything I can gather coming out of this past weekend don't seem likely right there. 3-star offensive tackle Marcus Mascal, fresh off that LSU visit last weekend, visited Gainesville this past weekend. And LSU was the team to beat, I think, coming out of their visit. Still seems to be the team to beat coming out of the Florida visit as well. I think Florida did some good here. And if anything was to happen with the LSU, I think Florida would be in a good spot here. But it does seem like LSU, the Georgia native, would be right now trending toward the LSU Tigers. So let's move to the other side of the ball. Biggest defender in for the weekend, defensive back Zay Mincy. Big decision, of course, coming. The decision that was probably not going to come anytime soon, or not be in the cards for any timeline soon for Zay Mincy. So Florida just needed to continue to impress him. Names Florida with Alabama, Miami, Florida State, and Texas A&M. While you can't throw out any school, it does seem like Florida State may have lead over others right now. Visits FSU next week, then Texas and Miami after. Not really a timeline here for Zay Mincy. Florida likes where they're at with him, using Corey Raymond, of course, to go a long way here for Zay Mincy. But this can been on campus countless times, can come on campus anytime he wants. This is more just by keeping that relationship, needing to find ways every time he's on campus, keep chipping away and making sure if there is a slight lead, there might be a slight lead for Florida right now, but keep continuing to build that time after time when he's on campus. Let's see. 4-star edge from Maryland, Jalen Harvey has a decision on July 4th. Haven't heard too much that makes me think Penn State won't be the pick there, even after the visit this past weekend to Gainesville. One that might have been on commit watch over this past weekend, cornerback Justin Denson from Rhode Island. He'll return to Gainesville this week to camp, and we'll see if anything more comes out of that. Still should be on your watch this week as Florida is still tops for him. Was hosted by Jakeem Jackson and really connected with him as they were both cornerbacks converted from wide receiver. So may visit Alabama this coming week, as he says. They just started pushing for him, but Justin Denson should be back on campus this week, camping for the Gators. We'll see, Florida gets anything more they need to see here before, a possible commitment from Justin Denson, the cornerback from Rhode Island. New name probably starting to rise up just a bit. Three-star defensive lineman from Georgia, Mekhi Burrow, was on his official to Gainesville this past weekend. Came out saying Florida is his leader. Has visits to Ole Miss and Michigan coming up. Sean Spencer really stood out for the 6'5", 390-pounder, saying that Spencer showed him he could be more than just a nose tackle, can play multiple spots on the interior of the defensive line. Wants to commit in July, says Florida has a big lead over Georgia and Ole Miss right now. So let's peek ahead a little bit. That's kind of my recruiting roundup from this past weekend, where Florida stands for some targets and ones they should feel good about right now. But let's peek ahead a bit, and we'll have another episode Wednesday night. SEC schedules get released Wednesday night. Remember that for next season. The 8-game conference schedule with Texas and Oklahoma coming in, it gets released Wednesday night. So we'll have an episode Wednesday night here on Gators Breakdown. And we'll take a look at the visit weekend coming up, as well as that SEC scheduling. But one to go ahead and maybe peek ahead a bit with, just because some good news. Crystal balls flying in, take that for what it's worth for you. But let's peek ahead. Nasir Johnson, 4-star defensive lineman from the state of Georgia, visited that Thursday, June 1st, before all the big group came in for their first official visit weekend. Out of that June 1st visit, that Thursday, where he's kind of by himself a bit, called Florida his leader, did Nasir Johnson. Now he's been crystal balled to Florida by Blake Alderman, heard at other places as well, that Florida looking good for Nasir Johnson, returning back with some family on campus this coming up weekend. But remember, he told Swamp 24/7's Blake Alderman, getting an in-depth look at the Gators' plans for him in their scheme was the highlight. He left with a much stronger understanding of not only how they want to use him, but how he can help boost the front line of the defense. Playing around the 4-5 tech and playing around that area, being able to show my versatility and show where I can play in pass downs and run downs as well. They can use me in a lot of ways in their defense. I feel like I can fit in what they want to do, especially the way they want to use me. I don't have to be a big body top guy in the middle. I can be a bit more outside and move around. So, Florida's selling that versatility up front, play a couple positions, not necessarily just one. And look, that's college football now. So you have to be able to sell that and have guys that can play multiple positions, multiple downs right here on the defensive front. So he visited South Carolina this past weekend, back to Florida this coming up weekend for another visit, then visit FSU on June 23rd. So it should be on commit watch this coming up weekend. Very athletic defensive line prospect, 6'4.5", 300 pounds. Taking his official visit this weekend to the Gators. So should be one to watch out for. That crystal ball rolling into from 24/7 Sports, Nasir Johnson from the state of Georgia. All right, let's keep it going. And now a little bit of bad news, of course. I got to come back and circle around on Chauncey Bowens, running back, of course, that was committed to the Gators, flips to Georgia. And look, ain't no sugarcoating this one. It hurts. It hurts. One player the staff was high on at the top of the running back board. Once, this staff got in early on before many of the other big programs, did the early work, identified him, got him to commit, had a great relationship with Jabbar Jaluk and the staff. But now, another in-state player that's now flipped to Georgia. So, no sugarcoating it. The staff really wanted him. But overall, not a running back, not a position I worry about too much with his staff. But Bowens would have been great in this offense, and now Florida has to play against him. Now has to line up against him. So he certainly got pulled from a team, the allure of a team that wins a lot, competes for championships, competes for titles, sends running backs to the league. But eventually, you got to win these battles. These are battles you want to find yourself in with Georgia, because that means you're recruiting some really, really good players. Well, especially the ones you get committed, you really got to capitalize on. You got to keep those guys committed here. So, right now, early enough for Florida to still pivot at the running back position and find what they want to do. But, losing out on Bowens, that one hurts. I like what he was bringing to the table, kind of a well-rounded running back, powerful running back. Would have loved to have him in this offense. The staff absolutely would have as well. Took that commitment early, only to see it not really pay off. In-state running back going out of state to the Georgia Bulldogs. All right, so where's Florida turn for another running back? If they decide to take one here, Kanan Daniels, already committed, of course. Mekhi Danzy is a name, but seems like FSU's the team to beat right now. He's from Tallahassee, top 230 back. May try and visit Florida. He says in December, so it's a while away. Can you get him before we would even commit to FSU? If he visits to FSU, would he completely shut it down? But that's a name I think maybe to look out for. I may have to go ahead and try and flip Ohio State commit Jordan Lyle from St. Thomas Aquinas, 326th ranked player in the country. Perhaps maybe you can sell him on staying closer to home instead of going to Ohio State. One more I'll throw out there, Tampa, Carrollwood Day, running back Anthony Carey. Of course, we brought his name up before. 253rd ranked player in the country. Averaged just over 100 yards rushing per game, totaling 919 rushing yards and 16 touchdowns on 141 carries. He's coming off of a Michigan State visit, so we'll see. 3 names. We'll see where Florida goes after Bowens decommits. But there's three I think you maybe to start with. Look out for where Florida could pivot and maybe bring in another running back in this class, of course, to bring in with Kanan Daniels. So, of course, Lewis and Bowens to Georgia kind of, just sets up another storyline of, Florida-Georgia recruiting battles. All right, that's where we'll go next here, of course. And, some battles, we'll keep it going just because the hills of Bowens. And, I can see where there might be little confidence in winning the battles for tight ends Chris Jones and edge Jordan Ross. Those are the two I think we should bring up for Florida-Georgia battles right now. Jones has pretty much said it's Florida and Georgia, even with a Michigan State visit in there. Florida's the team to beat right now, but that Georgia trip, of course, looms large coming up this weekend. Of course, Georgia has a lot to sell, but they brought in 2 tight ends last cycle, already 2 this cycle as well. So that's 4 right there in just the last 2 classes already. Now, look, they'll have no issue processing guys if need be, but that's certainly something to monitor. But we'll see. When you start looking at, Chris Jones and where that would go. But man, it's just setting up to be. But why am I saying tight end? Because he's a linebacker. I was thinking of Walter Matthews, of course. For whatever reason, I get Jones and Matthews names mixed up. So let's go linebacker. And Georgia has a lot to sell because of the linebacker spot, of course. That defense and what they're able to do on defense and adding that. And, of course, losing that on Sammy Brown to Clemson last week. Do they pivot a bit? I got lost there for whatever reason. Vacation brain, I guess, still moving in here. But you got some defensive battles here for Florida and Georgia with Chris Jones, the linebacker, and Jordan Ross, the edge player. But it's Florida-Georgia battles coming up here. And, Jordan Ross, coming off that Georgia visit, had nothing but great things to say about his Florida visit last week. And, of course, great things to say about that Georgia visit this past weekend as well. And like the stuff he said about Florida was genuine, and Florida getting in on the state of Alabama prospect. But Georgia's going to be a force for any player, especially on the defensive, a highly rated defensive player out there. Ross visited Athens this past weekend, and coming out of that, says it's a Florida-Georgia-Tennessee battle. But Florida-Georgia have had a recent momentum here as well. Decision may not come into the fall, so Tennessee can work themselves in it maybe a bit more. I think we're hearing more Florida-Georgia right now coming off those 2 visits this past weekend. But we'll see if Florida can get him on campus one more time. And look, I'm sure, we start looking at what happens with Bowens, and that's, on the offensive side of the ball. Now on the defensive side of the ball, what Georgia is known for the past couple of years, and then linebacker Chris Jones, edge player Jordan Ross. Florida-Georgia battles coming up right there. We'll see where that one goes. So, all right, let's keep the storylines going here. Plenty more to get into as far as big names go, and that's one Austin Simmons, the 2025 quarterback that Florida has committed, and we've talked for months about him reclassifying, and that still looks like to be the plan. Either way, if it was going to be Ole Miss, where he visited last week, 2 official visit weekends ago, or was going to be Florida if he reclassifies. So it had that Ole Miss visit, and there was a lot of talk coming out of that Ole Miss did some good things to maybe make him change his mind, and maybe Ole Miss was trending, and Florida had some work to do to get him back in the fold. Looks like that work has been done. He visits Florida late last week. Seems like everything's rectified and resolved, and I'd expect any time now probably for that reclassification talk to come back out, and he ends up in the 2023 class, not the 25 class, of course. But Austin Simmons seems to be staying put, and there was a scare last week with that Ole Miss visit, and this could help, of course, make up for the Jaden Rashada saga just a bit there. And I know everybody was looking at it because if you didn't get him and him reclassifying for 23 and he goes off and goes somewhere else, then you're waiting for all the way until DJ Lagway for quarterback to pay off for Billy Napier, and what kind of crazy storylines the 2023 class had with the quarterback position. But now, just looking at what looked admittedly a little scary last week with that coming off that Ole Miss visit, Austin Simmons looks like everything is good there, and look for him to make that decision soon if he's going to reclassify or not. I think that still happens. I've said that the whole time. A lot of people out there have, and we'll see what happens here with Austin Simmons and that announcement coming soon for him staying put at Florida and becoming a Gator and enrolling pretty soon. One more bit of news before sign off here. Let's get caught up a bit. Quincy Ivory, he landed the offer. The edge player here committed Saturday, got that offer over the weekend, committed pretty much right then and there. He plans to enroll at Florida this summer. We'll have 3 years of eligibility remaining as a JUCO player. He played quarterback and linebacker last season at East Los Angeles College. I mean, odd, right? So not many of us saw this one coming. And, Napier had said they were looking to add edge depth here. Didn't think many of us was thinking it was going to come in this kind of form. But Ivory played quarterback and linebacker last season at East Los Angeles College. On defense, he recorded 8 sacks, 12.5 tackles for loss, 2 forced fumbles, 3 fumble recoveries in 10 games as a freshman. So being able to play both sides, make that switch to play defense, put up numbers like that. And, we'll see how that translates. This goes back to the class of 2023 as well, not to the class of 2024. As I said, we know Billy Napier said many a time over the spring, probably adding some depth at this position. So looks like they got the room for it. So we'll see. But, this was one that has 3 years of eligibility remaining. So it's not like, it's not just one and done. He'll be on scholarship for 3 seasons now. So staff obviously saw something here to bring him on board. But 12.5 tackles for loss, 8 sacks, 2 forced fumbles, 3 fumble recoveries for Quincy Ivory coming in, committing to the Gators over the weekend as well for the back to the class of 2023. So, all right, think we're caught up right now. Ooh, a little whirlwind. I was going fast through all that, trying to get you guys all caught up. Back from vacation, ready to go. As I said, later this week, look out for Wednesday, SEC announcing the 2024 schedule. Texas, Oklahoma coming in and previewing it right quick. I mean, look, we know SEC says 8-game conference schedule in 2024. Texas, Oklahoma coming in. We're going to try and keep the main rival and secondary rivalries here for this 8-game schedule. So for me, for Florida, that probably means, of course, Georgia. Then I'm going to go Tennessee. I think it's between Tennessee and LSU. But when you look at how it would go, for Tennessee, you're going to give them Alabama, of course. And then secondary rivalry, I think you're going to give them Florida. And for Florida, I think you give them Tennessee. And, of course, Georgia. I don't think it would be LSU because I think LSU is going to get Texas A&M and Ole Miss, probably. If you start looking at, Tennessee and Alabama, but then you start looking at Alabama, well, that's Alabama and Auburn. Alabama, you got Auburn and Tennessee, my bad. So you can figure out Alabama's pretty easy. You can figure out Auburn's pretty easy because it's going to be Alabama and Georgia. Keep that going. So, who would Georgia's secondary be? Never mind, just told it to myself. You got Florida and Auburn. So for Florida, it'd be Georgia, Tennessee. So I think you can figure out the main and the secondary rivalries pretty easy for a lot of your top tier schools when you look at it. So I think it'd be, if I may have to make a prediction, I'd say it's going to be Florida with Georgia and Tennessee on the schedule. And remember, in addition to Miami, UCF, and FSU in 24. So I think I can name about 5 teams Florida's going to play. You have Georgia, Tennessee, and those 3 out-of-conference games right there. So that's the way I think it will play out, just by the way the SEC saying they were going to keep one main rivalry and a secondary rivalry as well. I do think that will be Georgia and Tennessee for the Gators, but we'll see. We'll see for Texas. You're going to give them, I think, Texas A&M and Oklahoma, right? So Texas A&M, LSU, and Texas. So you can start kind of, maybe figuring it out if they're going to keep the games I think that make the most sense. But we'll see what the SEC decides to do here with this 8-game schedule for 24. Hopefully, this is the only season of 8 games. But we'll do an episode on it Wednesday night, right here when the SEC announces the 2024 schedule. I don't think they'll lay it out as far as dates go, but you'll be given the opponents for your 2024 schedule. So, all right, that'll do it for this episode of Gators Breakdown. I'm your host, David Waters. You can find me on Twitter at GatorDave_SEC. Guys and girls, thank you for joining me on this episode of Gators Breakdown.